Welcome. Thanks for everybody for joining today. Today's webinar, we're going to be talking about BYOC, best practices for bring your own carrier for your cloud services, if it's either unified communications or cloud contact center. So if you haven't seen our website, we have a couple upcoming webinars that you can register for. So we have a Mitel 14.2 end of life update coming on July 14th, and then July 21st, we have a Genesis admin training on reports and dashboards. So there's been some updates to dashboarding in the Genesis platform. So if you haven't seen that, if you're interested in Genesis or already have Genesis, feel free to join that one, and you can learn more about the reports and dashboards as well. Quick agenda here. I'll do a quick thing about who is InflowCX if you're newer to our webinar series. If not, then we'll jump through that real quick. Then I'll jump right into the BYOC best practices. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the question and answer. I'll try to answer them while I'm on the slides. If I can't get to them, we'll save some time at the end for question and answer, and then to contact us as well. So if you have questions that I can't answer, I need to do some more research on, then we can follow up with one of our, somebody from our sales team or somebody from our sales engineering team as well. All right, so who is InflowCX? For any of you, been around a long time, we started out, solely as a unified communications, company. Now we've kind of transitioned, into a provider of strategic advisory, deployment, managed services, for contact center, customer experience, and unified communications. So we still do, the unified communications piece, but we've added on, advisory and consulting, and a lot of contact center customer experience capabilities. So we help organizations with guidance, execution, optimization, of the customer engagement. Now we have, experience or expertise in customer experience, UC, contact center, workforce management, workforce optimization, AI, automation, analytics, all of those kind of pieces that go kind of around your communications platform. So we have a vendor neutral approach for the customer experience. Labor strategies, for BPO, stuff like that, operational effectiveness, everything like that around our consulting team now. 75 plus employees, over 1,000 customers. We've done over 500 contact center deployments, 1,000 UC deployments, and 300 contact center consulting engagements. So some of the accolades we have is 5.9 Sales Partner of the Year last year, Genesis Implementation Partner of the Year, NICE CX1, Platinum Partner. Zoom and RingCentral, implementation and preferred partners. So all the major, contact center and UC players out there, we've kind of partnered with, to be able to offer implementation services, training, managed services, and then just consulting around different solutions that, that can fit your needs. I missed one slide there. Some of the customers that we work with, all kinds of different, you can see all the different, verticals and everything like that. Some names you'll recognize on there, but our customers span all kinds of sizes and verticals out there, so we can help, customers regardless of size or vertical that they're in. The technology partners that we work with here, so you can see there from the contact center perspective, Genesis, 5.9, NICE, UJET, Twilio, Talktis, Avaya, all the major players in the contact center space. On the bottom, the UCaaS players, RingCentral, Zoom, Fuse, 8x8, Nextiva. We do integration with Microsoft Teams, Dialpad, and then in the middle, kind of our ecosystem. Those are the companies that kind of play or integrate with the different platforms on the top and bottom there. So from sampling of everything that that you can use with your contact center or UC platform. We can integrate a lot of different platforms together, to give you a full solution. So if you have questions, if you're not quite sure where you're going with your UC or contact center needs over the next 12, 24, 36 months, reach out to one of our sales team. We're happy to have a conversation, help you map out what your migration to the cloud looks like over the next 24, 34 months, whatever like that. So, all right, well, now for what everybody came here for, we're going to talk about bring your own carrier, BYOC. So if you see BYOC on a regular basis, it's a pretty common term now when it comes to cloud. So bring your own carrier. So we're going to talk about best practices when you're migrating to the cloud. It doesn't really matter if you're looking for UC or contact center. The same methods apply for UC or for contact center. When you're migrating to the cloud. So the first thing we like to talk about is what does cloud dial tone architecture look like? Everybody knows what their dial tone architecture looks like when you're on site. You either have analog lines, PRIs or SIP trunks, connected to your phone system and contact center when you're on site. But when you move to the cloud, how does that change? What does that look like? So we have a dial tone, up in the very top bubble there. That's how we get our calls in and out of our cloud architecture. And then most of our providers host in a public cloud there. So you can see either AWS or Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud or a private cloud, that they host themselves. And then from there, that's going to where all the call control, auto attendance, all the kind of functionality is going to live. Your client control, soft phones, everything is going to live in that kind of internet bubble there. Unless you have physical devices, then your physical devices will be the only thing you have on site. For in most cases when you move to a cloud deployment. So then your conference phones, your desk phones will connect up to that public internet cloud, and then you might have computers with soft phones and stuff like that for your agents or for your regular users. I would say the bulk of our customers, when they migrate to the cloud, about 80% of users switch to headsets and soft phones because it's just more convenient. It's easy. Wherever they take their laptop and their headset, they can work. So most cloud providers host in the public cloud. All of them prefer to be the dial tone provider. So they've all partnered with companies, or they've bought companies so they can be a dial tone carrier. So when you're migrating from an on-prem system up to the cloud, typically the go-to, the recommendation from that provider is going to be, just port your numbers up to us. We'll become your dial tone carrier. And that is the easiest way to do it. It's the cleanest and simplest. Everything is, kind of all is a one-stop shop. The cloud provider, is your dial tone provider, and your and your cloud system, contact center or UC system provider as well. All of them offer geographic redundancies. So if they're hosting in Amazon or Azure or Google Cloud, typically, they're going to be hosting in between 3 and 4 data centers at a time. So they have geographic redundancies. If they're like RingCentral and they have their own private cloud that they've built and they host, then they'll host in one of their 3. They'll host in 2 of their 3 data centers at a time. So in this case, RingCentral has an East Coast to West Coast, in a Chicago data center. So they'll put your phone system up in 2 of those 3 active, so they can fail over live, between locations as needed. So that's kind of like the standard architecture that you're going to get with a provider if you're moving to any of the cloud contact centers or any of the cloud UC providers. That's going to be your kind of your standard architecture. You port your numbers to them. That it connects to whatever cloud provider they're hosting in, and then your phones and soft phones connect up to them, and they own your phone numbers, they own your caller ID, all that kind of they own your E911 capabilities and everything like that. So it makes it kind of quick and easy, all-in-one solution, so you don't less to manage and less to deal with. But there is some issues around that. Is if your carrier is if they're hosting out or they're contracting dial tone services from somebody else, they have less control over that dial tone. There's been a few use cases, every single month with our customers where a dial tone provider has an issue. Well, then the cloud provider, they can't really do anything about it because they're not the carrier. What they have to do is they have to then open a ticket with the carrier and, and get an update, try to move a number or something like that. So how do we get around that? Well, the only way around that really is to do BYOC and say, okay, we're not going to use the carrier as our provider. We're gonna bring in our own provider to provide the dial tone, to that cloud system. And not all providers allow us to do this. I think I was just looking. I got to answer those couple questions there, so that's good. So dial tone architecture, if you look here, it doesn't look that much different when we bring our own carrier. So the only thing that really changes is the very top portion of it. So what we do is we bring our own carrier in, and then we use a failover routing to the cloud provider to be the secondary provider. So what this allows us to do is we can still use the cloud provider, but we use it as a backup. So that way, if the carrier we bring in has a problem, then we fail over and use the cloud provider as a secondary provider in there. And so that way gives us some additional redundancies. We have redundancies built into AWS and Azure and Google and everything like that. So why would we only have a single carrier, is our single point of failure? So BYOC takes care of this and gives us some flexibility around not having a single point of failure, and also giving us more failover capabilities, because in this case, if when the carrier was the only provider and something goes down, we reach out to the carrier, they open a ticket up, and they have to wait, wait for an issue, the issue to be resolved. In this case, if the customer owns the relationship with the primary BYOC carrier, an issue goes down, you can have it automatically set up to fail over to a different phone number, or you can call them and fail over manually. And a lot of the providers offer 2 and 3 levels of failover. So if they can't deliver a call to the cloud, they can fail over to a secondary phone number, which could be on the cloud provider. Well, if they can't deliver that as well, then they can the second layer could be, let's fail it over to a cell phone. So that way we get two layers of failover, one to the cloud provider and 2 to cell phones. So we can have additional redundancies, so we can take those customers' calls regardless of how we take them. Sure, it might not be convenient to take them on a cell phone, but taking them on a cell phone might be better than not taking them at all. So use the cloud provider as a secondary dial tone. Primary carrier support for multiple failover routing options. So that's my recommendation: is pick a provider who offers at least 2 levels of failover. Maybe sometimes they offer 3 or something like that. Different carriers. If you're migrating to the cloud, not all carriers allow you to bring your own carrier. So if you haven't migrated to the cloud yet and you're considering it, that's something that we can help with in determining which of the different cloud providers that you're looking at offer BYOC. And I would say in the contact center space, all of them do. I was just thinking through all the ones that we've done, that I've done. I've coded out and built out solutions for in the past year, and all of the contact center providers pretty much allow you to bring your own carrier, into the solution. From a UC perspective, that's where it gets a little bit more limited, and that's around one of the questions somebody just asked. Is not all UC providers allow you to bring your own carrier. Some of them allow you to provide a backup carrier, but they have to be the primary carrier, and then you're a backup carrier to them. And then the last note here is some of the cloud providers require you to have an on-site session border controller or device from them to support bring your own carrier or failover dial tone. So a couple of examples I'll give you here. If you want to have with Genesis Contact Center, they support bring your own carrier into the cloud, but if your carrier requires you to have like a session border controller or something like that, then Genesis has their own device that device would talk to, that we put on site. Zoom allows you to bring your own carrier, but only if you connect it to one of their certified session border controllers. So you would have to have a session border controller, that's certified by Zoom in order to bring your own carrier and connect it to Zoom UC. RingCentral offers what they call like a backup dial tone, that you can provide backup dial tone to the system, but it does also require an audio codes device, that the RingCentral sets up, and it connects to their system, and then you can connect up to a limited number of trunks, which I think it's 12 trunks I can connect up to the RingCentral persist gateway. So some of the providers require you to have an on-site piece of equipment, which for some customers, they're like, well, I'm trying to get rid of equipment. Why do I want to bring more equipment on site? And that's why a lot of customers say, well, we'll just stick with the carrier, as our provider, or or provider as the carrier, instead of us bringing our own BYOC provider. But other companies will say, great, we support it. Let's use it. Let's utilize BYOC in the cloud, and that's always the preferred method, is cloud-to-cloud communication between the carrier and your provider. That way there's no on-site equipment, there's no equipment that can fail. It's data center to data center. There's power redundancies, internet redundancies, everything at those data centers. So we're not limiting ourselves with one piece of equipment. If you're have an SBC on site and you lose power to your building, that SBC just lost internet, so now we're having to fail over to the secondary provider anyway. So we try to limit equipment anywhere we can, so that way we don't have to deal with a single point of failure with having dial tone, connected through a single one of your locations. Another use case for BYOC is if you have a cloud contact center and a cloud UC system. Maybe you want to connect the 2 systems together, or maybe you want to use the 2 systems as a backup to each other. So maybe you have a 5.9 contact center and an 8x8 UC system. Well, if you have BYOC at both on both of those systems, and one of those providers were to have an issue and say, oh, great, we have an 8x8 outage or something like that right now, we could fail those phone numbers over to your contact center system, to 5.9, and say, great, oh, let's at least take those calls inbound. Well, if 8x8 was our provider and they had an outage, they wouldn't be able to fail over calls because they have an outage. They're not going to be able to to fail over calls in an outage scenario. So if we have a bring your own carrier, we can fail over between solutions or in between providers as well. So we've done that a number of times with customers. It fails over the same way. If 5.9 were to have an issue, 5.9 runs their own private cloud, system, and they also host some stuff as well in a public cloud. But if they were to have an outage, we could fail over the calls, over to our 8x8 system. So that's another good use case for BYOC, because we're not now limiting ourselves to a single provider, during an outage. We'll do that a lot with Teams. Bring your own carrier is probably the best use case scenario when you're talking about Microsoft Teams, because you can buy dial tone from Microsoft, but Microsoft offers no SLA on their dial tone yet. They offer SLA on Teams being up in itself, but they have no SLA when it comes to their dial tone. So if you're looking at doing Microsoft Teams, bring your own carrier for Microsoft Teams is really the only way to go, because you could bring your own dial tone provider in, get an SLA with that provider, and then if Teams were to have an issue, which there's been Teams outages, you could simply fail over those calls off of Teams to cell phones, or to a contact center or something like that, which is pretty common. If with Teams doesn't offer a contact center, a full-fledged contact center solution, so they've partnered, and you can do an integration between Teams and a lot of the major, contact center providers out there. We've done a lot of Genesys, Teams integrations and stuff like that, where Teams is the UC system, Genesys is the contact center system, and with a BYOC provider, we can come in and we can fail over calls between Teams and Genesys back and forth. If Genesys were to have an issue, we can route those calls to Teams. If Teams were to have an issue, we can route those calls to Genesys. So really, with BYOC, it really gives us the flexibility that we can't ever get when we have an on-prem system, with that, when it comes to that failover capabilities. Because if we lose power, at our main facility with an on-prem phone system, we lose the bulk of our functionality. Yeah, we can have some limited functionality at different sites, but we can't have a complete system up and running. Where once we move to the cloud, great, one of the data centers goes down, the other data center is already running and live, and we can fail over 100% of the functionality, to a secondary data center. So we get added functionality for DR in the cloud. So we might, with data centers, so we might as well take advantage of that same functionality when it comes to BYOC, with the different providers that that are out there as well. All right, I'm looking to see here if there was any questions I didn't answer. Okay, I got one question here from us from SBCs. That says, do the carriers provide SBCs, or do I have to buy an SBC myself? That depends on the solution. I would say some of the providers will sell you an SBC, their own. Other ones, they'll give you a list and you go out and buy them yourself. But you'll always have to buy an SBC in most cases, unless you had a provider, like a cloud a carrier provider who provided a session border controller that was certified with the carrier, or with the let's just say, I'll give you a scenario. If I had a SIP provider who had an SBC that they could drop on my site that was compatible with, say, Zoom, that might work. But a lot of those SIP carriers don't want to necessarily do direct connections to a carrier. So in most cases, I'm going to say you're going to have to buy a session border controller if that cloud provider requires one. Some will let you buy them from them. Others will say, hey, here's a list, go out and buy your own session border controller. So if they do require it, plan on in your budget, you're going to have to buy that SBC and maintain that SBC, which is one thing that I don't like. I try to get away from maintaining as much of that equipment and force it onto somebody else, rather than having to, the IT department to maintain another piece of equipment. Another SBC question. Are some of these SBCs offered virtually? Yes. So There is some session border controls that you can do virtual. I would say the most common SBC that's virtualized is the audio codes. And so if you're running a Teams environment, they actually have inside of Azure, you can spin up that audio codes in an Azure environment and do it all virtually. And that way, I actually love that option, especially if you're doing Teams, do a virtual Azure SBC. That SBC can then connect to a cloud carrier. That SBC can also connect to a contact center solution, to pass calls back and forth. So you can use that one SBC in Azure for multiple purposes, to kind of get your money's worth out of that. And there's two licensing options when you do virtual like that from Azure. Is you can pay as you go and just pay minute usage on it, or you just buy it outright, and just pay a hosting fee to Azure every month to host it for you. So that's the most common. There is a couple of other virtual ones that you can use. Ingate, I think Edgemark or Oracle now has one too, but they're less common. They're less certified. When it comes to big providers, Audio Codes is certified as an SBC on almost every single cloud provider out there. So there's a lot of flexibility and options when it comes to using Audio Codes as the virtual SBC there. All right, I think I got through all of the questions there. So if you do have any other questions, feel free to post them in the question and answer section. If you want to have a follow-up conversation, feel free to reach out to us. If you have an Inflow account manager or sales rep already, reach out to them. They can schedule a conversation with one of our sales engineers, and we can look through your system. There's a lot of on-prem systems that are announcing end of development or end of support or end of sale and stuff like that over the next 3 years, as more and more companies are switching their investment from development resources over to the cloud. Mitel just did a big sale of their cloud architecture, their cloud business, over to RingCentral in November of last year. So, a lot of our Mitel customers who are considering migrating to the cloud with Mitel, well, that now RingCentral owns that piece of the Mitel business. So, Mitel's pretty much said, look, we're not developing on the cloud anymore. If you want to go to the cloud, we've partnered with RingCentral, to make our Mitel phones work with RingCentral as well, which is nice. So there's a lot of movement going on right now between acquisitions and mergers and stuff like that. Genesys and Zoom just announced a partnership to make the Genesys contact center platform in the Zoom UC system more integrated together, so that you can kind of pair a best of breed video and UC solution with the best of breed contact center solution. So there's a lot of that kind of going around right now as companies are trying to figure out the best ways to invest their money in the research and development, to kind of keep up with everybody else in the cloud. So there's a lot of stuff going on. If you're not quite sure where your cloud strategies are, live for the next 36 months or whatever, feel free to reach out. Get a conversation with us. We can help explore it. If you need to do a full RFP process or consulting process, we can bring in our consulting team and they can help you, evaluate 4, 5, 6, whatever, how many products you need to meet your needs, and help in the RFP process and all that stuff as well. So thanks for joining today, and look forward to seeing you on another webinar in the future.